What's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today's account is different from anything I've shared before. This isn't a military report. This isn't a classified document. This is a story passed down from father to son. A story told hundreds of times over 60 years. A story that destroyed a man's career and haunted him until his final breath. The person sharing this with us today is the son of a marine biologist who claimed to have witnessed something in Antarctic waters in 1957. Something that shouldn't exist. Something that gave him a warning we've been ignoring ever since. If you're new here, this channel shares accounts of experiences that challenge everything we think we know about our world. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and drop a comment if you've ever heard a story that nobody believed but you knew was true. This one stayed with me for days after I first read it. Let's get into it. My father told me this story hundreds of times before he died. Always the same way. Always with the same details. When I was a kid, I thought it was just a bedtime story. Something he made up to make the world seem more mysterious. When I became a teenager, I thought it was early dementia. That his mind was slipping and he was confusing dreams with reality. But he kept telling it, word for word, decade after decade. The dates never changed. The descriptions never varied. And in his final days, when he could barely remember my name, he still remembered every second of what happened in those Antarctic waters. He made me promise I'd tell his story after he was gone. I promised, just to give him peace. But 3 weeks after his funeral, I received something that changed everything. Now I'm not sure if I'm keeping a promise or delivering a warning. My father's name was Dr. Richard Coleman. He was a marine biologist, a good one. At least he was supposed to be. His career should have been remarkable. He graduated top of his class from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in 1956. He published 2 papers on Antarctic krill populations before he turned 24. He had offers from every major research program in the country. His future was set. And then he went to Antarctica, and everything fell apart. He told me the story for the first time when I was 7 years old. I remember because it was my birthday. We were sitting on the back porch of our house in Massachusetts. It was late. Everyone else had gone to bed. Just me and him under the stars. He looked up at the sky and said, "You want to know why I never went back to the ocean?" I said yes. And he told me the whole thing. I didn't understand half of it, but I remembered the way he looked when he said it, like he was seeing it all over again. Antarctica, 1957. He always started the same way. I was 24 years old. It was my first real expedition, not a training mission, not a supervised research trip. This was the real thing. International Geophysical Year, Joint Soviet-American Program. We were studying polar ecosystems during the height of the Cold War. Scientists from both sides working together. It was supposed to be a symbol of cooperation, proof that science could transcend politics. I was the only American biologist on a crew of 40 men. Everyone else was Soviet. I barely spoke Russian, but I didn't need to. Science was the language we shared. He described the ship in detail every time. A converted icebreaker called the Mikhail Samov. Steel hull, reinforced bow, diesel engines that never stopped rumbling. He said it smelled like fuel and fish and unwashed men. The crew quarters were cramped, bunks stacked 3 high. No privacy, no warmth. The temperature inside the ship was barely above freezing. Outside, it was -30 on a good day. He said you never got used to the cold. You just learned to function through it. The mission was simple. Collect biological samples from Antarctic waters, krill, plankton, fish populations, study how life adapted to extreme conditions, map biodiversity in regions that had never been properly surveyed. My father was responsible for specimen collection and initial analysis. He spent 12 to 14 hours a day on deck or in the lab, hauling nets, sorting samples, recording data. He said it was the hardest he'd ever worked, and he loved every second of it until February 5th, 10th. That date never changed. February 5th, 10th, 1957. He said it like it was burned into his brain. They were positioned near the Ross Ice Shelf, water so clear you could see 30 meters down. The ship was stationary, engines idling. They were deploying deep collection nets to sample krill populations at different depths. My father was on deck supervising the equipment. Standard procedure. He'd done it 100 times. But the weather was changing. The barometric pressure had dropped 6 millibars in 2 hours. The captain had noted it in the log. Storm coming. But they had maybe 4 hours. Plenty of time to finish the collection and secure the deck. Except the storm didn't wait 4 hours. It hit in 20 minutes. My father said he'd never seen weather turn that fast. One moment, clear skies. The next, wind screaming at 60 knots. Waves building to 15 feet. The ship started rolling, hard. The crew scrambled to pull in the nets and secure loose equipment. My father was clipped to a safety line. Protocol, always. But the waves were coming from the wrong direction, crossing patterns. The ship twisted violently. He lost his footing, slid across the deck, and then a wave hit the starboard side like a sledgehammer. He said he remembered the sound more than anything, the roar of the water, the groan of the ship's hull, the snap of his safety line separating from the anchor point, and then he was airborne, weightless for half a second. Then he hit the water. The cold was immediate, total. He said it felt like being stabbed by 1,000 knives at once. His survival suit kept him from dying instantly, but it was torn, water flooding in. He had maybe 2 minutes before hypothermia shut him down. Maybe less. He sank fast. 15 meters. 20. The weight of the water in his suit pulling him down. He tried to inflate the emergency flotation, but the valve was jammed. He kicked, fought, tried to swim up. But the current was pulling him deeper. He could see the hull of the ship above him, fading, getting smaller. He thought he was going to die. And he said, in that moment, he felt almost calm, like his body had already accepted it, and then he saw movement. 3 shapes, coming from below, moving fast, too fast to be seals, too large to be fish. He thought maybe they were divers, rescue team, but that didn't make sense. No one could have deployed that quickly. No one could swim that fast. And as they got closer, he realized they weren't human, not entirely. And that's when everything he thought he knew about the world stopped making sense. My father described them in detail every single time he told the story, and the details never changed, not once. I've heard psychologists say that's a sign of truth. That fabricated stories shift over time. Memory is unreliable, but trauma? Trauma gets locked in. Every detail preserved exactly as it happened, and my father's details never wavered. Not in 60 years. 3 of them. Humanoid. That was the word he always used. Not human. Humanoid. The torsos were human in shape. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. But everything else was different. Adapted. The skin was translucent, not transparent. You couldn't see through it, but you could see into it. Like looking at a jellyfish. Pale blue-green. And bioluminescence. Soft pulsing light that moved under the skin in patterns. He said it was beautiful, terrifying, but beautiful. Their faces were the hardest part for him to describe. He said they looked almost human, but wrong. The proportions were off. Eyes too large, no visible nose, just 2 small slits where nostrils should be. Mouths wide, lipless, and when they opened them, he could see rows of small, sharp teeth. Not like a shark, more like a dolphin. Designed for gripping, not tearing. Their eyes were black, completely black. No white, no iris. Just pure black reflecting the faint light filtering down from the surface. They had gills. 3 vertical slits on each side of the neck. He could see them opening and closing. Rhythmic, like breathing, but underwater. Their hair was long, flowing, but it wasn't like human hair. It moved independently, like each strand was alive, responding to current, or maybe to something else. He said it reminded him of sea anemone tentacles. The color shifted between dark green and blue-black, and it never tangled, just flowed. Their hands were webbed. Thin, translucent membranes stretched between the fingers. The fingers themselves were longer than human fingers, more joints, more flexibility. The nails were dark, pointed, not claws exactly, but not human nails either. He said they moved through the water with their hands, precise gestures, almost like sign language. And the water responded, He couldn't explain it, but he swore the current around them moved differently, like they controlled it. They circled him, slowly, keeping a distance of about 2 meters. He was still sinking, still dying, but they didn't help. They just watched, studying him. He said the way they moved was hypnotic, no wasted motion, completely efficient. They didn't fight the water. They were part of it. One of them, the largest, had scars across her shoulder, long parallel lines, like claw marks. She was clearly the leader. The other 2 stayed slightly behind her, deferring. My father tried to signal for help. He pointed up, tried to mime drowning, but they didn't react. They just stared. And he realized they knew exactly what was happening to him. They understood. They just hadn't decided whether to care. That's what terrified him most. Not that they were alien, but that they were intelligent, and they were choosing to watch him die. Then the scarred one moved closer. She raised her hand slowly, non-threatening, and reached toward his face. He flinched, tried to pull back, but he was too weak, too cold. She pressed her palm against his diving helmet, right over his temple, and the world exploded. He said it felt like his skull was splitting open. Not pain exactly, but pressure, overwhelming pressure, like something was being forced into his brain, and then he heard it. A voice, but not a voice. Words without sound, inside his head. Clear as day, calm, female, and speaking perfect English. You are dying, but you are not our concern. Your kind broke the agreement. You should not be here. He tried to respond, tried to think the words back, but nothing happened. She continued. We have watched you, your ships, your machines. You descend too deep now. You take too much. You poison our waters. This ends, he said. The pressure in his head increased, and suddenly he wasn't seeing the water around him anymore. He was seeing something else. Images, not his memories, hers or theirs. He couldn't tell, but they were flooding into him faster than he could process. Cities underwater, structures carved from rock and coral, thousands of them, living in the deep. He saw history, ancient history, humans on beaches, primitive, wearing skins, and he saw them, the mere people, emerging from the waves. A meeting, a negotiation without words, just gestures. An agreement. The images shifted. He saw boundaries being established, surface waters for humans, the deep for them. He saw millennia passing, humans building boats, fishing, staying shallow, and below, their civilization thriving, unnoticed, undisturbed, coexisting, separate, safe. But then the images darkened. He saw ships getting bigger, engines, submarines, sonar, drilling, explosions, nets dragging the ocean floor, oil spills, plastic, dead zones, and he felt something he didn't expect. He felt their rage, cold, patient, but absolute. The images stopped. My father said he gasped. The pressure in his skull eased. A reflex. The scarred one pulled her hand back. The other 2 moved closer, flanking her, their black eyes fixed on him. He was still sinking, still freezing. He could barely feel his hands anymore, but his mind was sharp, painfully sharp. Whatever they'd done to him had shocked his system into hyper-awareness. Every detail was crystal clear. The scarred one gestured with her hands, slow, deliberate movements, and he heard her again. In his head, your kind has forgotten, but we remember. 12,000 of your years ago, we made accord. We divided the ocean. You took the light, we took the dark. For millennia, you honored this. You fished the shallows. You respected the boundary. But now you have technology. Now you think the entire ocean belongs to you. It does not. My father tried to think a response, to argue, to explain, and somehow it worked. He thought, we didn't know. We don't know about you. How could we know? The scarred one tilted her head, like a bird observing something strange. She responded, ignorance is not innocence. Your ancestors knew. They taught their children. The stories survived for generations, but you stopped listening. You called them myths, legends, superstitions. You chose to forget. That does not erase the agreement, he thought back. What agreement? I've never heard of any agreement. She moved closer, her face inches from his helmet, her black eyes reflecting his own terrified expression. The oceans have limits, depths you must not pass, regions you must not enter, resources you must not take. Your kind agreed to stay above 300 meters. You agreed not to drill the deep trenches. You agreed not to harvest the abyss. And for 12,000 years, most of you honored this. But in the last 100 years, everything changed. My father felt his consciousness starting to slip. The cold was winning. He was losing the fight. The scarred one noticed. She gestured to the other two. They moved behind him. He felt hands on his suit, pulling, not up, just stabilizing, keeping him from sinking further. The scarred one continued. We are patient. We have watched your species evolve. We watched you discover fire, build cities, cross oceans. We remained hidden. As agreed, we hoped you would stay wise, but you did not. You became arrogant, greedy, and now you threaten not just yourselves. You threaten us. He tried to focus, tried to keep his mind clear. He thought, how? How do we threaten you? The response was immediate, forceful. Sonar destroys our communication. Your ships kill our young. Your nets drag our territories and take everything. Your pollution spreads into the deepest waters. Your drilling destabilizes the foundations where our cities exist. Your noise drives our food away. Your waste makes our waters unlivable. You take and take and take, and you never ask. You never consider. You act as if we do not exist. My father said he felt shame, real deep shame, even as he was dying. Even in the grip of hypothermia, he felt responsible. He thought, I didn't know. I'm sorry. I'm just a scientist. I'm trying to understand life, not destroy it. The scarred one pulled back slightly. Her expression shifted. He couldn't read it, but it looked almost like pity. She said, you are not the problem. You are one man, but your kind is the problem, and your kind will not stop. We have observed. We have waited. We have hoped, but nothing changes. The violations increase. Year after year, more ships, more machines, more destruction, he thought. What do you want? What can I do? The scarred one was silent for a long moment. The two others holding him exchanged what looked like glances. Then she responded. Tell them. Tell your kind. The agreement still stands. The ocean is not yours alone. We exist. We are billions. We have cities in the Mariana Trench, the Puerto Rico Trench, the Java Trench, everywhere you cannot reach. But we can reach you. We choose not to, but if forced, we will act. My father felt fear then, real primal fear. He thought, act how? The scarred one moved her hand in a sweeping gesture, and he saw more images, ships disappearing, suddenly, without distress calls, without wreckage, just gone. Drilling platforms collapsing, underwater cables severed, submarines and research stations flooded, and he understood. They weren't threats. They were capabilities. She said, we do not wish violence, but we will defend our territory. Tell your kind. Stop descending. Stop drilling the abyss. Stop polluting. Stop taking everything, or the ocean will become forbidden to you. Completely. He tried to ask how. How could they enforce that? But the pressure in his skull was fading. The connection was breaking. The scarred one pulled her hand away completely. She said one last thing, faint, almost lost. You will survive this. We will ensure it, but you will not be believed. That is your burden, to know truth and carry it alone. Goodbye, surface dweller. Pray your kind learns before we are forced to teach. And then they were gone, vanished into the dark water below him, like they'd never been there. My father said he blacked out. The cold finally won. His last conscious thought was wondering if he'd hallucinated everything. Oxygen deprivation, hypothermia, dying brain making sense of chaos. But then he felt hands again, human hands, rough, pulling him up. Voices shouting in Russian, the hull of the ship, a rope. And then nothing. My father woke up 3 days later in the ship's medical bay. Severe hypothermia, frostbite on his fingers and toes, mild pulmonary edema from water inhalation. The ship's doctor said he was lucky to be alive. 15 minutes in water that cold should have killed him, but he'd survived. They didn't know how. The rescue team said they pulled him up from 28 meters. They said his safety line was still attached to his suit, but it wasn't attached to the ship. It was just floating. Cut clean, not frayed, not torn, Cut. He asked them how long he'd been in the water. They said 11 minutes. From the time he went over to the time they pulled him out, 11 minutes. But he remembered more. He remembered sinking, talking, seeing things. It felt like 30 minutes at least, maybe more. But they showed him the log, the timestamps. 11 minutes. He didn't argue. He was too disoriented, too confused, too focused on the images still burned into his mind, the cities, the agreement, the warning. On his second day conscious, the captain came to see him, Captain Volkov, a Soviet naval officer assigned to oversee the research mission. Stern man, didn't smile, didn't waste words. He sat down next to my father's bunk and said, "You are recovered. Good. We continue mission in 2 days. You will resume duties." My father nodded. Then he said, "Captain, I need to report something. What I saw in the water." Before I blacked out, the captain's expression didn't change. He said, "You saw nothing. Hypothermia causes hallucinations. This is known." My father insisted. He described the 3 figures. The communication, the warning. He didn't hold back. He told everything. The captain listened without interrupting. When my father finished, the captain sat in silence for a full minute. Then he stood up. He said, "You experienced oxygen deprivation and extreme cold. Your brain created images to process trauma. This is common. You will not include these hallucinations in your official report. You will not discuss them with the crew. You will not mention them in any correspondence. This is not a request. This is an order. Do you understand?" My father tried to argue. He said, "But what if it's real? What if there's something down there we need to?" The captain cut him off. "There is nothing down there but water and ice and fish. You are a scientist. You will act like one. If you persist in this fantasy, I will have you removed from the mission and returned to the United States with a formal psychiatric evaluation. That evaluation will end your career. Do you understand now?" My father said he understood, but he didn't. He just knew he had no choice. He spent the next 6 weeks finishing the mission. He collected samples, recorded data, wrote reports. He didn't mention what happened, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time he looked at the water, he wondered if they were watching. Every time they deployed nets deep, he felt guilty, like he was violating something sacred. The other scientists noticed he changed, quieter, distracted. They assumed it was trauma from the accident. They weren't wrong, but it wasn't the kind of trauma they thought. When the expedition ended, my father returned to Woods Hole. He tried to resume his career, but everything felt hollow. He'd sit in lectures about marine biology and think, they have no idea. None of them have any idea what's really down there. He tried to focus on his research, but he couldn't. Every paper he read about deep-sea exploration felt like a violation. Every new submersible, every deep ocean mining proposal, he saw them as threats, not to science, to the agreement. The agreement no one remembered, no one but him. 6 months after returning, he made a mistake. He was at a conference in Boston, Marine Biology Symposium. He'd been drinking, not much, but enough to lower his guard. A colleague asked him about Antarctica, about the expedition, and he told the story. Not all of it, just pieces. He mentioned seeing something unusual, something that looked humanoid, something intelligent. The room went quiet, then someone laughed, then everyone laughed. They thought he was joking, making up a story. When they realized he was serious, the laughter stopped. The looks changed, concern, pity, embarrassment. The next week he was called into the dean's office. They asked if he was okay, if he needed time off, if he wanted to speak to someone, a professional. He said no. He said he was fine, but the damage was done. Word spread. The brilliant young marine biologist who claimed to see mermaids in Antarctica. His credibility evaporated. Colleagues stopped collaborating with him. Research funding dried up. Invitations to conferences stopped coming. Within a year, he was finished, not fired, just frozen out. Academia has ways of dealing with people who don't fit, and my father no longer fit. He left Woods Hole in 1959, moved to a small town in Massachusetts, got a job teaching high school biology, married my mother in 1962, Had me in 1965. He never went back to the ocean, never published another paper, never attended another conference. He lived a quiet, normal life, but he never stopped telling the story. To me, to anyone who would listen. Most people thought he was eccentric. Some thought he was mentally ill, but he didn't care. He said he'd been given a message, and even if no one believed him, he had to keep delivering it. My mother asked him once, in front of me, why he kept telling the story if no one believed him. He said, "Because one day, someone will need to know it's true. And when that day comes, I want the record to exist, even if it's just in my son's memory." My mother didn't understand. I didn't either. Not then, but I think I do now. My father started keeping records. Obsessively. He subscribed to every maritime journal he could afford. He tracked shipping incidents, unexplained disappearances, anomalous sonar readings, diving accidents with strange details. He filled filing cabinets with newspaper clippings, research abstracts, and incident reports. He was looking for patterns, evidence, proof that he wasn't alone, proof that what he'd seen was real. And he found things, not proof, but things. In 1963, a Soviet submarine disappeared in the North Atlantic. The K-129, lost with all hands. Official cause, unknown. But my father found a leaked report from a sonar operator on a nearby vessel. The operator reported hearing biological sounds inconsistent with known marine life in the hours before the submarine's last transmission. The report was dismissed, classified as irrelevant, but my father kept it. He said, "They were warned, and they didn't listen." In 1968, the USS Scorpion sank near the Azores. 99 crew members dead. Official cause, torpedo malfunction. But my father tracked down testimonies from 3 separate fishing vessels in the area. All 3 reported seeing unusual lights beneath the surface the night before the sinking, bioluminescent patterns moving in formation. The Navy investigated, found nothing, closed the case. My father said the lights were them, marking territory. The sub ignored the warning. In 1974, a deep-sea drilling platform in the North Sea collapsed. 12 workers killed. Official cause, structural failure. But my father corresponded with one of the survivors. The man described hearing sounds through the hull in the days before the collapse. Rhythmic impacts, like something hitting the support columns from below. The engineers checked, found nothing. 3 days later, the platform buckled. My father wrote to the company. They never responded. He said they were sabotaging it, protecting the deep. He collected dozens of these incidents, submarines, drilling platforms, research vessels, all with strange details, unexplained sounds, unusual lights, equipment failures with no clear cause. Most were officially classified as accidents, mechanical failures, human error. But my father saw a different pattern. He said, "They're enforcing the boundary, quietly, selectively. They don't want a war, but they're making sure we know the limits. We just choose not to see it." I grew up surrounded by these files. As a kid, I thought my father was paranoid, a conspiracy theorist. I was embarrassed by him. My friends thought he was weird. Teachers gave me sympathetic looks, like I was dealing with something difficult at home, and I was, but not the way they thought. My father wasn't violent, wasn't neglectful. He was just obsessed. Obsessed with a story no one believed. Obsessed with a warning no one heeded. And I resented him for it. When I turned 18, I left for college. Got as far away as I could. Studied business. Something practical. Something rational. Something that had nothing to do with oceans or biology or underwater civilizations. I wanted a normal life. I called home twice a year. Visited once. My mother begged me to come more often, but I couldn't. Every time I saw my father, he'd want to talk about it. The Antarctica story, the incidents, the patterns. And I couldn't take it anymore. I'd stopped listening years ago. My mother died in 2005, cancer. My father called me. I flew home for the funeral, stayed 3 days. My father looked old, fragile. He tried to talk to me about the files, about the new incidents he'd been tracking. I told him I didn't want to hear it. I said, "Dad, you need to let this go. It's been almost 50 years. No one cares. No one believes you. You're wasting your life." He looked at me with these sad, tired eyes and said, "I'm not wasting my life. I'm keeping a record. For when it matters." I didn't respond. I left the next morning. Didn't visit again for 10 years. We spoke occasionally. Brief phone calls. Birthdays. Holidays. He'd ask about my work. My life. I'd ask about his health. We avoided the topic. The story. The obsession. It was easier that way. But I could hear it in his voice. The disappointment. Not that I didn't believe him, but that I'd stopped caring whether it was true. He'd raised me on that story, and I'd rejected it completely. I think that hurt him more than the ridicule from his colleagues ever did. In 2018, he had a stroke. Minor, but it scared him. He called me, asked me to come visit. I made excuses. Work, travel. I promised I'd come soon. I didn't. 6 months later, he called again. He said, "I'm not going to be here much longer. I need you to understand something. The story is true. Everything I told you is true. And one day, you're going to need to know that. Please, just promise me you'll keep the records. Even if you don't believe, just keep them," I promised. Just to make him feel better. Just to end the conversation. I had no intention of keeping anything. He died in August 2019. Heart attack. Sudden. The neighbor found him in his study. Surrounded by his files, I flew back to Massachusetts. Cleaned out the house. Sold most of his things. The files I almost threw out. 50 years of clippings and reports and correspondence. All of it chasing a story no one believed, but I remembered my promise. So I boxed them up, put them in storage. Figured I'd deal with them later. I didn't look at them. Didn't want to. They were just a reminder of a sad, obsessive man who'd wasted his life on a delusion. Then, 3 weeks after the funeral, I received a package. The package arrived at my apartment in Chicago on a Tuesday morning. No return address. Just my name and address handwritten on brown paper. The postmark was smudged, unreadable. I almost threw it out. Thought it was junk mail. But something made me open it. Inside was a small wooden box. Old, weathered, salt-stained, and a sealed envelope. I opened the envelope first. Inside was a single piece of paper, handwritten. The handwriting was shaky, like someone elderly or injured had written it. The message was short. "Your father saw the truth. We have observed you. You do not believe, but you will. The agreement still stands. Tell your kind. Stop descending. Stop drilling. Stop taking. This is the final warning. If ignored, the ocean will be closed to you completely. We are patient. But patience has limits. No signature. No name. Just that." I read it 3 times. My hands were shaking. I didn't know why. It was probably a prank. Someone who knew my father, knew his story, trying to mess with me. But the handwriting didn't match anyone I knew, and the tone was wrong. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't playful. It was formal, almost diplomatic, like an official communication. I put the letter down and opened the wooden box. Inside was a photograph, black and white, severely faded, water damaged at the edges. It showed an underwater scene, dark water, visibility maybe 20 meters. And in the center of the frame, partially obscured by particulate matter, was a figure. Humanoid, pale, with long flowing hair. The image was blurry, but you could see the proportions. Too tall, too thin, arms too long, and the eyes. Even blurred, you could see them. Large, dark, staring directly at the camera. I flipped the photo over. On the back, written in pencil, Ross Sea, February 15th, 1957, depth 28 meters. Camera recovered from Dr. R. Coleman's equipment after rescue. Film damaged. Single frame salvageable. Never officially kept as personal record by Chief Petty Officer Dmitry Koskov, USSR Navy. Returned to rightful witness before death. I stared at that inscription for 10 minutes. My father's name. The exact date of his accident. The depth matched his story. Everything matched. I took the photo to 3 different experts, professional photo analysts. I didn't tell them what it supposedly showed. Just asked if it was authentic or manipulated. All 3 said the same thing. The photo was genuine. Film degradation consistent with age and water damage. No evidence of double exposure or darkroom manipulation. One analyst said, "This is real film from the 1950s. Whatever's in the frame was actually there when the shutter clicked. Whether it's a person, a statue, a trick of light, I can't say. But it's not a hoax." I went back to my storage unit, pulled out my father's files, spent 2 weeks going through everything, every incident, every report, every piece of correspondence. And I saw it, the pattern he'd been tracking for 50 years. Ships disappearing near deep ocean trenches, drilling platforms collapsing in areas marked for deep extraction, research submarines imploding at depths they were rated for. And in almost every case, there were details, strange details, unexplained sounds, bioluminescent phenomena, equipment failures with no mechanical cause. I cross-referenced the incidents with oceanic depth charts. Every single one occurred in areas deeper than 300 meters, the boundary my father said they'd established. Below that depth, incidents increased exponentially. Above it, standard accident rates. It could be coincidence. Deeper water means more pressure, more risk, but the consistency was unsettling. And the sounds. Multiple reports mentioned sounds, rhythmic impacts, vocalizations outside known marine species, acoustic patterns suggesting intelligence. I found something else in my father's files, letters, dozens of them, addressed to government agencies, NOAA, the Navy, the Coast Guard, environmental organizations, all of them describing what he'd seen, warning about the deep ocean, pleading for limits on exploration and extraction. Most were never answered. A few sent form letter responses. "Thank you for your interest. Your concerns have been noted." One letter from a NOAA official said, "We appreciate your passion for marine conservation. However, claims of undiscovered intelligent species require empirical evidence beyond personal testimony. We encourage you to submit any physical evidence for peer review." My father had no physical evidence. The photo had been kept by the Soviet sailor who'd processed it. My father never knew it existed. Without it, he was just a man telling a story no one could verify, no one wanted to verify, because if it was true, it changed everything. Every deep-sea operation, every resource claim, every assumption about human dominion over the oceans. It was easier to dismiss him, to call him delusional, to move on. But now I had the photo, and I had the letter, and I had 50 years of documented incidents that aligned with my father's story, and I didn't know what to do with it. I couldn't prove anything definitively, but I couldn't dismiss it either. I started researching current deep-sea operations, and what I found terrified me. Deep-sea mining, abyssal drilling, trench exploration, all expanding rapidly. Corporations and governments racing to claim the ocean floor. Areas my father said were forbidden. Areas they said were protected, and no one was stopping it. I thought about going public, publishing the photo, sharing my father's files, but I knew what would happen. The same thing that happened to him: ridicule, dismissal, maybe worse. In the internet age, conspiracy theories spread fast, but so does mockery. I'd be labeled a fraud or a lunatic. The photo would be called CGI. The letter would be called a forgery. And even if some people believed me, what would change? Would governments stop drilling? Would corporations abandon profit? Would anyone actually listen? My father spent 60 years trying to deliver a warning, and he failed. Not because he was wrong, but because the truth was inconvenient. Because people don't want to believe the ocean isn't theirs. Because admitting the existence of another intelligent species in the deep would require sacrifice, compromise, humility, and humanity doesn't do well with those things. My father knew that, and he tried anyway, because he believed it mattered. Because he believed someone would eventually listen. He believed I would listen, and I didn't. Not while he was alive. I dismissed him, abandoned him, let him die alone in a house full of ignored warnings. And now I had the proof he never had, and I didn't know if it was enough, if anything would ever be enough. I spent 6 months debating what to do. I kept the photo locked in a safe, kept a letter with it. I read my father's files over and over, memorized the incidents, the patterns, the warnings. I watched the news obsessively. Every deep-sea mission, every mining announcement, every unexplained maritime incident, and I saw it. The pattern was accelerating. More incidents, more equipment failures, more disappearances. Like they were escalating, like their patience was running out. In January 2020, a Chinese deep-sea mining vessel disappeared in the Mariana Trench. Crew of 47, lost without a trace. No distress call, no wreckage found. Official cause, unknown. But I found an interview with a nearby research team. They reported unusual acoustic activity in the hours before the disappearance. Low-frequency pulses, organized, repeated, not geological, not mechanical, biological. The research team's findings were classified by the Chinese government, never published, but the interview leaked. I saved it, added it to my father's files. In March 2020, a Norwegian drilling platform in the Arctic collapsed. 32 workers evacuated, 3 killed. Official cause, structural failure due to ice pressure. But an engineer I contacted off the record said the damage pattern was wrong. The support columns hadn't buckled from above. They'd been compromised from below. Precision cuts, almost surgical. He said it looked deliberate. He reported it, was told to retract his statement. When he refused, he was fired. I documented everything, added it to the files. In July 2020, a joint-use Japanese submersible imploded in the Java Trench. 2 crew members killed. Official cause, hull failure at depth. But the submersible was rated for the depth it was operating at. And 3 days before the incident, the crew reported seeing bioluminescent phenomena, organized light patterns, moving in formation. They took video. The footage was confiscated by the Navy, classified, never released. One of the support crew leaked a description before being silenced by an NDA. I found the description on a maritime forum, saved it, added it to the files. The pattern was undeniable. They were responding to every deep incursion, every drilling operation, every mining mission, not openly, not with declarations or demands, just quiet sabotage, precision strikes, enforcing a boundary no one admitted existed, and no one was connecting the dots. Or if they weren't saying it publicly, because saying it would mean admitting they existed, and that was unacceptable. Easier to call it accidents, bad luck, engineering failures. I realized my father was right about something else. The truth didn't matter. Evidence didn't matter. People believe what's convenient, and the existence of an intelligent species in the deep ocean was inconvenient. It threatened economic interests, national security interests, the fundamental human belief that we were the dominant species on this planet. Admitting we shared it, especially with something we couldn't control, was impossible. So the incidents would continue, the warnings would be ignored, and eventually something worse would happen. I thought about my father's last words to me. One day, you're going to need to know that. I didn't understand then, but I did now. He wasn't talking about me personally. He was talking about humanity. One day we'd need to know. When the warnings turned into action, when the quiet sabotage became open conflict, when the ocean stopped being accessible, when ships started sinking not one at a time, but in fleets, when they decided we'd gone too far, and by then it would be too late to negotiate, to apologize, to step back, I decided to tell the story, not to convince everyone. I knew I couldn't, but to create a record, so that when things escalated, someone could look back and say, we were warned, multiple times. We chose not to listen. I reached out to this channel, sent the photo, sent my father's files, sent the letter, told them everything. They asked if I was sure, if I understood the backlash, the ridicule, the consequences. I said yes, because my father faced all of that for 60 years, and he did it alone. The least I could do was face it with his vindication. I don't expect this to change anything. I don't expect governments to stop drilling, or corporations to abandon deep-sea mining, or militaries to restrict submarine operations. But I expect the incidents to continue, to increase. And I expect that one day, the pattern will become impossible to ignore. And when that day comes, maybe someone will remember this. Remember my father. Remember that we were told. and we didn't listen. My father used to say, the ocean doesn't belong to us. We just convinced ourselves it does. And one day, the real owners are going to remind us. I think that day is coming, sooner than we think, and we're not ready, because we still don't believe, even with the evidence, even with the pattern. We'd rather believe in coincidence than confront the reality that we're not alone, that we're not in control, that there are limits we don't get to set. I'm sharing this because my father can't, because he spent his life trying and failed, because someone needs to say it clearly. They exist. They are intelligent. They have been patient, but patience ends. And when it does, the ocean will become hostile, not to punish us, to protect themselves. And we'll have no one to blame but ourselves, because we were warned, repeatedly. We just chose not to listen. It's been 4 years since I received that package. 4 years since I started seeing what my father saw. The pattern, the warnings, the evidence hiding in plain sight. And in those 4 years, things have accelerated. The incidents are increasing. The scale is growing. And the silence around them is deafening. I've documented 23 major incidents since 2020. Deep sea vessels, drilling platforms, mining operations, all with the same strange details. All officially unexplained, all quietly buried. In 2021, a Russian research submarine went dark in the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench. 14 crew members. No distress signal, no wreckage. The official report said catastrophic implosion, but a leaked sonar log from a Japanese monitoring station showed something else. Multiple large contacts moving in formation around the submarine's last known position. Biological signatures. Too large to be whales, too organized to be random. The log was retracted. The analyst who leaked it disappeared from public record. I have a copy. It's in the files. In 2022, an American deep-sea mining operation in the Clarion-Clipperton Zone lost 3 autonomous vehicles in 1 week. Each one simply stopped transmitting. No mechanical failure logged. No recovery possible at that depth. The company blamed software glitches, but an engineer I spoke with said the vehicles were designed with triple redundant systems. All 3 failing simultaneously was statistically impossible. He said the last telemetry from each vehicle showed external impacts, deliberate, precise. He was fired 2 days after filing his report. I documented everything. In 2023, a European drilling consortium abandoned a $1 billion project in the Mediterranean. Officially, they cited unforeseen geological instability, but I found testimony from 3 separate crew members. All reported the same thing: sounds through the hull, rhythmic, intelligent, equipment failures that made no sense, and lights, bioluminescent patterns moving beneath the platform. The consortium paid them to sign NDAs, but one of them talked to me before signing. He said, "Whatever's down there doesn't want us drilling, and I don't blame them. We're tearing up their home." The incidents are no longer isolated. They're coordinated, targeted, specific. They're hitting the deepest operations first, the most invasive projects, the ones that penetrate beyond the 300-meter boundary my father talked about. It's selective enforcement, a message. Stay shallow, stay out of the abyss, or face consequences, but no government will acknowledge it. No corporation will admit it, because acknowledging it means stopping, and stopping means losing profit, losing strategic advantage, losing the race to claim the ocean floor. I've tried to warn people. I've published articles, posted the photo, shared my father's research. Some people listen. Small communities, environmental groups, independent researchers. But the mainstream ignores it, calls it conspiracy theory, calls me a fraud, says the photo is fake despite expert analysis, says the incidents are coincidence despite the pattern, says my father was delusional and I'm continuing his delusion. And maybe I am. Maybe this is all confirmation bias. Maybe I'm seeing patterns that aren't there. But I don't think so. Not anymore. Because 3 months ago, something changed. The incident stopped being covert. In November 2024, a multinational deep-sea mining fleet was operating in the Peru-Chile Trench. 7 vessels, supported by 2 military ships. the largest deep-sea operation in history. They were extracting polymetallic nodules from the abyssal plain, 4,000 meters deep, far beyond the boundary. On the third day of operations, all 7 mining vessels lost power simultaneously. No mechanical explanation. No storm. No external attack. Just complete electrical failure. The military ships tried to assist. Both reported sonar contacts, hundreds of them, surrounding the fleet, moving in organized patterns. The fleet was towed back to port. The operation was suspended indefinitely. The official report said electromagnetic anomaly, possible seismic activity. But I spoke with someone who was there, a crew member on one of the mining vessels. He said they saw them, in the water, around the ships. Hundreds of them, glowing, watching, not attacking, just forming a perimeter. He said it was a blockade, a line they were told not to cross again. He quit the next day, left the industry entirely. He said, "We're not welcome down there. And if we keep pushing, they're going to stop being polite." That's when I realized my father's warning wasn't just about isolated incidents. It was about a tipping point, a moment when patience runs out and tolerance becomes action. And I think we're approaching that moment. The incidents are escalating. The responses are becoming visible. The message is getting harder to ignore, and yet we're still ignoring it. Still planning deeper missions. Still expanding operations, still treating the ocean like it's ours to exploit without consequence. I think about the letter I received. This is the final warning. That was 4 years ago. How many warnings have there been since? How many incidents? How many lost ships and failed operations? At what point does a warning become an ultimatum? At what point does selective sabotage become total exclusion? I don't know, but I think we're about to find out. Because the pattern suggests they're preparing for something, mobilizing, organizing, and when it comes, we won't be able to call it coincidence anymore. My father used to tell me the story to prepare me, not to scare me, to prepare me. He said, one day, people are going to need to understand what happened, why the ocean became hostile, why we lost access, and someone needs to be able to explain it. Someone who knows the truth. I didn't want that responsibility. I still don't, but it's mine now, because he's gone, and the story is real, and the warning is running out. I'm recording this because I believe we're in the final window, the last chance to step back, to acknowledge their existence, to respect the boundaries, to stop treating the deep ocean like empty territory waiting to be conquered. If we don't, I think the next phase won't be sabotage. It'll be expulsion, complete, total, permanent, and we'll lose the ocean. Not because we're weak, but because we refuse to share, refuse to respect, refuse to listen. My father saw them once, 67 years ago. He spent the rest of his life trying to make people understand. He failed, but he left me the tools to try. The photo, the files, the pattern, the proof. I'm sharing it now because I don't know how much time we have left. Maybe none. Maybe the line has already been crossed. But if there's a chance, any chance, that someone with power will see this and choose differently, then it's worth the ridicule, worth the consequences, worth carrying the burden my father carried alone for so long. They exist. They are intelligent. They have been patient. But the patience is ending. And when it does, the ocean will belong to them again, completely, the way it did for 12,000 years before we forgot the agreement. My father remembered. Now I remember. And I'm telling you, because you need to know. Before it's too late, before the warnings stop, before the ocean closes, before we lose something we can never get back, not because they take it, but because we force them to defend it. This is the story my father told me, the story that destroyed his career and defined his life, the story I didn't believe until I couldn't ignore it anymore. It's yours now, believe it or don't, share it or bury it, but remember it, because one day, when the ships stop returning, when the platforms fail, when the deep becomes forbidden, you'll need to understand why. And this is why. We were told. We were warned. We chose not to listen, and the ocean remembered. Even my father's name was Dr. Richard Coleman. He died believing no one would ever vindicate him. I hope he was wrong. I hope this matters. I hope someone listens, because the alternative is a world where the ocean becomes our enemy, not because it wants to be, but because we gave it no choice. If this recording disappears, you'll know they don't want the truth out there. If I disappear, you'll know I got too close. But the files exist, the photo exists, the pattern exists, and the truth exists, whether anyone believes it or not. Pay attention to the deep ocean, watch the incidents, see the pattern, and ask yourself, how many warnings do we need before we finally listen? When we forgot,